Welcome to the 9/15/2020 start of the City Council meeting. We're in the discussion regarding with the District Attorney regarding the May 5th, 2020 officer involved in the shooting in Half Moon Bay. May we start off with a roll call?
Yes, Councilmember Penrose?
Here.
Councilmember Rarback?
Here.
Councilmember Redditt?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brownstone?
Here.
Mayor Eisen?
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, and I just wanted to thank you all for helping to make this discussion happen, especially Steve Wagstaff for coming tonight to talk about his investigation. We're very appreciative that you've taken the time to speak to this community regarding everything that you've discovered. So thank you so much for making the time for us. I guess at that point, I'm gonna start off just with some quick notes so the public understands. When we get to the public comment portion, I'm gonna open it for public comment. And if you would please raise your hand, we're gonna wait about 20 seconds as people raise their hands. At that point, we're gonna determine how many people wanna speak. Based on how many people wanna speak, we're gonna try to allocate exactly how much time we can allocate to each person. And that way we can make sure to respect everybody's time and also start our city council meeting at the right time. So we're going to, again, I'm gonna ask for public comment. People can raise their hands. We're gonna see how many hands are raised. If there aren't that many, we'll give everybody 3 minutes. If there's a lot, we're gonna go to 2 minutes and we'll go from there. Staff will have a timer and will alert you when you have 30 seconds to wrap up. Then once your time is reached, in the interest of respecting everyone's time tonight, we will need to stick to the time limit. You will be told when your time is up at the 3-minute mark. So you'll hear it at 30 seconds, you'll hear it at 3 minutes. And then I will jump in and make sure that we move on to the next speaker. We will make sure to hear from every speaker. Every speaker will be heard from. And just given the sensitive nature of this topic, during public comments, we want to caution any viewers that there may be images or videos shared that may be hard for some to watch. So just know that if that's a problem for you, you might not want to participate in some portion of this conversation. With that, I'll move it over to our city manager, Bob, to introduce Steve.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, members of the public. Really just underscore, Mr. Mayor, what you already said with your introduction of Steve. About 10 days ago, maybe 12 days ago, Deputy City Manager Chittister and I met with Steve. It was actually the first time I'd ever met Mr. Wagstaff, and we met with him for a couple reasons, I think, that are somewhat obvious. First, we wanted to understand the process. Well, first, we wanted to convey to Mr. Wagstaff that this was obviously a case that had great interest from our community for a lot of reasons. But we wanted to convey that message that there was great interest. The report had just come out. And we also wanted to understand the process that he follows and how that relates to conversations that are going on nationally about these cases and how they should or should not be handled. So that was our purpose. We didn't ask him a lot of questions about the details of the case or his findings, but we did let him know we were really curious about the process, and he spent 1 hour and 15 minutes with us. And at the conclusion of that, I mean, it was just obvious to us that there's such great interest in this case by the community, by your council had made it clear to me also that we invited Mr. Wagstaff to come to this meeting, and he readily agreed. And he said it was not unexpected that we asked him to do that. And he indicated that this is part of his job as the DA. So we were very encouraged by that and set this meeting up as fast as we could. So with that, that's my introduction. It was great meeting you 10 days ago, Steve, and I'll turn it over to you. Our idea was that you could start and make your presentation before, as the mayor said, before we go on to council questions and public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Nisbet, and thank all of you for letting me come speak to you. This is not a chore for me. This is an honor to be here. Every decision that I make is one that I will explain to anybody who's interested, and try and not justify, not to try and make you agree with me, but at least understand where I came from, particularly in a case like this. And as was just noted, particularly in the days that we're living in, these cases are being viewed with a whole different tint to the glasses than we have in years gone by. What I wanted to start off by saying in a summary fashion is why the DA's office looks at these cases, why we do the investigation. When I started in the DA's office many decades ago, we did not. All we did was treat them like any other case. The police would investigate their own cases, or the sheriff's office would investigate their own, write it up, and then submit it to our office, and we would review it. A good 25 years ago, it was decided that's not the best way. My predecessor as district attorney, Jim Fox, a Half Moon Bay boy, many of you may have known, he and I established a procedure where we think for the public to feel comfortable that this is not going to, these type of cases will not be covered up, swept under a rug, that there ought to be an independent investigation done by my office. And we worked with law enforcement to create a protocol that every one of our law enforcement agencies in San Mateo County have adopted. And that's also something, if anybody's interested, we can make that available to anybody. But what it does is it says that when there is an officer-involved incident, it can be involving firearms, it could be involving some other tool, but where somebody is injured, where one of our citizens is injured, the police will not do the investigation. They will immediately call us out. I have a Bureau of Investigators, and we respond to all of these cases. We do so with the idea that we are the investigating agency. Obviously, like in this case, the sheriff's office would be securing the scene, making sure everything's there, but we're out as quickly as the time travel can get my inspectors over there. I will always have a deputy district attorney on the scene for legal purposes, and we will do that investigation from top to bottom. We will interview the officers, interview all witnesses, and do a full investigation, which is then presented to me for review. When it is presented to me, I don't want you to think that I take it into a dark room and sort of dwell on it. I have a team. It's comprised of those investigators. It is comprised of my homicide team. I have 3 prosecutors that do nothing but a homicide, and my 3 experienced attorney managers. We sit down, and over the course of hours, we go over every inch of it. We'll have read the reports ahead of that, but we go over it in great detail. And this includes getting our investigation, includes the coroner's report when there's a death, and it includes the forensic lab that may have analyzed evidence in the case. We do so, and then recommendations are all made to me after it's done. Sometimes we look for further investigation, but the recommendations are made for me. I never make the decision immediately. I always want to think about these because they're such important cases. When law enforcement uses the power that we as a community have given to them to inflict an injury of some sort on a citizen in our community. So I do take it very seriously and consider it. I then will make a decision. We will prepare a letter describing that decision, and then we will make it public. Now, out of the 20,000 felonies and misdemeanors that my office reviews every year, this is the only type of case where, number one, I'm making the decision and under these circumstances. And part 2, the only case where we make all of our reports public so that people can read them, see them, and form their own opinion. The only thing we do not make public would be matters that California state law precludes us from revealing. An example, if there's a witness who has a criminal record, we do not disclose that because we're prohibited by law from doing so. But for every other purpose, we put everything out there. In this case, I think just about every single thing that I reviewed, any citizen in our community can review. This year, we went a little differently. We are able to post them on so that people can, using a link that we can provide, people can read it. They don't have to come in and pour through the written reports. That's the methodology that we're using. Our time frame. Now, this one here, as you know, of course, occurred May 5th. When the shooting occurred, my decision was at the very end of August, and that may seem long to you. Reality is we do try to make it in that time frame of generally 2 months, 3 months at the outside. Again, that may seem, why so long? What I can tell you is that is the fastest in the state of California out of all 58 counties. And the reason it's fast is not due to negligence or lack of due diligence. It's caused because I want every resource I have to move on it quickly. To the county to my north, San Francisco County, their timeframe is usually about 12 to 18 months. For Santa Clara County, it's about 12 months, sometimes more. And throughout the state of California, it will vary between some as fast as 6 months, some up to 2 years and longer. I've always believed that these cases are such a heartache for the community. They're a heartache for the family of the decedent if it's a death, or if the person survives, for that person, and for the law enforcement officers and their families. So the sooner we can get it done by utilizing all of the resources I have, we move in that fashion. Another question that I think probably is on your mind may relate to the aspect of a new law that is on the governor's desk as we speak. It's AB 1506. It is a bill that would take, original bill would have taken all of these cases away from DAs on the basis that you need more independence and give them to the California Attorney General to do all the investigations for every one of the 58 counties in the state. The Attorney General has very strongly opposed that bill as not having the resources and saying leave it to the DA. I can tell you what my position is on that bill. My position was, if the public feels better in having these cases go to the Attorney General, I feel no possessory interest in them. It would be no problem for me. The bill went through a whole series, as legislation always does, as you know, went through a whole series of machinations. It finally ended with only applying to those cases where the person who was, it only applies where there's a death, not to where there's injury. And we do get cases with injury. We had one in Foster City in January of this year, where the person was shot but did not die. Where there is death and where the person was armed. If the person was not armed, they stay with the DA under the bill that's on its way to the governor, and we will see what the governor does with it. It's not immediately in effect. It doesn't go into effect for a year, but it's one I'm watching very closely because, again, if the public feels that's the avenue to go, the reason the Attorney General didn't want it was cost. It would be rather, it would take quite a bit of money. So the bill goes into effect if the legislature and the governor follow up with adequate funding. But that is my position on that bill. It's my position. These are not cases that I relish. They are not cases that anybody takes pleasure in. There is always sadness in them. And to that extent, we do our job. I perform the function that I'm constitutionally required to do. One more thing to mention, and before I turn it over for questions, is that these type of cases, one says, who's my boss? Who's the boss of the DA? Is it the Board of Supervisors, the county manager? And the answer to that is no. Every 4 years, there's an election, which the DA is on that ballot. And however, the Attorney General, by our Constitution of California, has supervisorial authority over DAs. In other words, he can't tell us what to do, but he can review any action and take it himself. For instance, in this case, and I've said this many times to people, if somebody wants to seek review in the Attorney General, that's never personal. That's fine. If they want to take it to the Attorney General and say, Attorney General, we want you to look at this and exercise your authority in judging it, I would take every report we have and say, here it is, Mr. Becerra, good luck with it, do whatever you want. What he can't do is he can decide maybe a case should be prosecuted. He has to do it in his own office. You cannot tell a local district attorney, because of the Constitution, that they must if they do not believe that is a case to be prosecuted. That's the general. And again, before we hit questions, I want to start what I did put in my letter, that this case involving the death of Miss Harmon is tragic. It's sad. It really, really hurts. And I'll tell you why. Any death is a horrible thing. Any use of force by law enforcement that causes injury it's sad that it becomes necessary on occasion. What really bothers me here is something that I've seen so much more in the last 10 to 15 years, and that's the component of mental illness. And that's been well documented in this case, and it really saddens me that the mental illness that was exhibiting itself that night ended in the way that it did, and that somehow an intervention earlier could not have occurred, because what I can tell you is that when I first started reviewing officer-involved shootings in around 1979, I was on the team to review. Those were just tend to be the standard, somebody shot in a robbery or domestic violence conflict, that sort of a thing. In the last 10 to 15 years, we did a 10-year study about 2 years ago, and we found that mental illness was a primary component in 75 to 80% of the cases that we were reviewing. That never existed before. It's also true in criminal justice at large. Mental illness is there. So when one looks, and I talk with people, I teach the officers at their field crisis team. I teach a 2-hour block to them. It's all about what we can do to deal with mental illness, to try and stop this. What can we do? I know the sheriff's office and 3 other agencies are now working on trying to implement a program to try and begin to get at it, but it doesn't change what I view, as I read it again today, I read the whole case again today, a true sadness for Ms. Harmon and her family and everybody involved in the case. So that's the way I wanted to start with that, and I am certainly open to any questions from anybody.
To council for any clarifying questions before we go to public comment. Does anybody have any?
I will have questions, but I want to hear from the public first.
Public first, okay. Anybody else have questions? I actually want to ask a few questions myself. Does anybody else want to ask any other questions? I'll wait to see if there's any others before I start. Okay. So one of my questions right out of the gate, just to understand, because as we get into the public comments area, I do want to try to understand a few questions. Let me just see if I can find these. Here we go. So I guess question number 1, were any shotgun casings recovered from this scene?
There were 2 shotgun casings still in the shotgun, the casings. We found the wadding at a building across the street, an approximate line of where the deputy Dominguez was standing. And that was a wadding that was there. There was no second wadding found. So what that tells us is we believe, because that wadding that we found in the gutter, actually we didn't find it, it was a citizen there, found it there. That wadding matched to the additional shotgun shells that were in her fanny pack on that. So we do believe that was one. The second casing that was in the shotgun, we don't know. No wadding was found. There was nothing found. We don't know. Obviously, at some point it was fired. This gun, by the way, takes 2 rounds. Then it must be reloaded. The casings were both in there. One of those casings may have been fired on this occasion. It may have been fired at some earlier occasion. That is one of the several areas we'll never know.
Okay. So is there evidence that Sandra Harmon, or I guess that shotgun was fired? Is there evidence that was fired?
There is evidence, and there are 2 things. Obviously, what I just described, the wadding.
Can you explain that? I'm so sorry, but I actually don't know what that means.
You know what, Mayor? And I'm not an expert either. I probably would, have to defer to Saul for that. But what I know is that when a shotgun shell is fired, the casing will stay in the shotgun. The wadding is what wraps up the small projectiles, the BBs or the pellets, whatever one wants to call inside that spray, into its target. The wadding goes in the same path but flies beyond it. And that wadding is what was found at the distance there and next to the gutter, I think it was, of the building across the way. The only other evidence we have that firearm was fired is, actually 2 things. Number 1 is the Deputy Dominguez said that he heard that gun fire, so it would be his description of what occurred. Additionally, we did collected from the autopsy, there was GSR, gunshot residue tracings that on her body, on her hands, and there was some. But what I know about GSR from all the murder cases I've done over the years is it's not definitive. There's so many things can react positively to GSR, but those would have been the 3 components that gave us reason to believe that she had fired the shotgun once. It could have been a second time. I don't have any evidence of that other than the casing in the gun.
Okay. Excellent answers, and thank you. I'm sorry to have to ask these questions, but
Not at all.
and then I have one more real quick. So I don't quite understand Deputy Dominguez. From my understanding, his body cam was not on, and I'm just wondering if we understand maybe why or what that means from your perspective and how that works. I you know, again, don't know this stuff inside and out, so I'm trying to just gain my own perspective.
It's a good question, and there are two parts to it. The first part is was his body cam on? Now, when it comes to policy, I defer to the sheriff's office, because whether a camera is on or not is generally not relevant to our case, except that we don't have evidence. It's sort of like, you know, we searched high and low for every business around there for any surveillance camera. But when it comes to the decision that I need to make, which is, did the conduct of these two one or both of the deputies violate the California Penal Code rules, whether that's on or not is not a key factor for me, unless we arrived at a conclusion that it was intentionally turned off to cover up behavior that was about to occur. We had no such evidence in this case. Now, whether it was in the policy, now the deputy told us what happened. We interviewed him and he gave us that. Now, whether that is in compliance with policy of the sheriff's office, I leave entirely to the sheriff's office for the reason I mentioned. But we did ask him, why was it? Because when he stopped, before he ever got to that restaurant parking lot, he was looking for this woman because they had the report from our reporting party that would had the contact with her as she was walking down the street with a bottle of wine and a shotgun. And he spoke with her. He asked and stopped to several other citizens and asked them about, hey, have you seen this woman of this description? With each of those, he had his body cam on. He turned it on because he was having the contact. When he could not find her, when he and Deputy Baba could not find where she was as they went down, going down the street, he had turned his camera off after the last contact. As he was going down the street, and he went, and somebody told him, an anonymous person who we don't know, told him, you ought to go check in the parking lot. You ought to go over there and see there's an RV there. You might find her, you might see what you're looking for there. He went there, parked his vehicle parallel to the RV, and went up. He did not turn his body cam on at that point because he didn't know if he'd be making contact with anybody.
Okay.
He then went, he heard a voice from inside. He then went to the door of the RV and said, sheriff's office. It was at that point that Miss Harmon stuck her head out, and he forgot to turn it on. And that was his explanation. He gave it to us in a taped interview. It's part of all the interviews were obviously recorded and they're all available. That was his explanation. We asked him, why was your body cam not on? And that was what he said. He'd had it on earlier, and this one here, it all happened so quickly. He said it suddenly escalated, and where he normally would have turned it on at that point, he simply, he doesn't really know either. He just said, I forgot to get it on at that point.
No, I appreciate the answer. And I'll ask one more question. And, you know, obviously I appreciate what you said about the sadness of all this stuff going down. And obviously the taking of life is not something anybody, you know, finds to be, it's sad and it's hurtful for a community overall. So, you know, we're exploring all these things. So, and I also realize that, you know, it must be very, from my perspective, at least, if I were to have taken a life, it would be very hard on me personally to deal with that mentally moving forward. And, you know, so from an officer perspective, I get that too, but I have to ask this question. So is there any disciplinary action that was taken against Mr. Dominguez for failure to have his body cam on? And maybe that's a different department again. And I understand that might be the answer because I hear how that's being going. But just so I can explain that to the public, can you talk to that at all?
Well, my office isn't involved in it.
Okay.
The way it always works is the agency involved always holds on its internal investigation until we're done, so that they don't interfere with the criminal investigation, which goes first. And we do that. We don't consult with them. We don't, I give them the result in the end. And then it's turned over to them, which is what I did August 28th when I issued that letter. It then belongs to them as to what avenue and any discipline that they would follow on that. That belongs to the agency involved. They don't even ask our opinion, and we never voice it because we are trying to keep a separation. I mean, there's always things that I wish would occur. I wish that the body cam had been on here. That would answer some of the questions that I know are out there. There's so many choices that one makes in these cases that my estimate today, I went back and tried to estimate how long from the moment that the deputy Dominguez stopped and went to that RV till it was all done, till it was completely done. And we're talking probably plus or minus no more than 2 minutes. It moved very, very quickly. And what we do is we break that down. I mean, we're not just a Monday morning quarterback. We're even far worse than that in terms of we break it down inch by inch, frame by frame, as we judge what they do.
Okay. I very much appreciate you answering those questions. Anything else from council before we move to public comment? Very good. All right, let's move to public comment. So currently, I see, as I go over here, I see 4 hands raised. Oh no, I see way more than that. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 currently. I'm gonna leave that up there for 20 seconds real quick. And if we stay at the 5, I see 6, we're gonna try a 7. Okay. All right, and so how it's gonna work is I'm not going to add any other people to this list unless they've raised their hand right now. And we're gonna take these 7, and then because we're gonna stay with 7, everybody can be allotted their 3 minutes, and we will not add another person. We're gonna take 7 public comments. And Jessica, can you start us off here?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Our first speaker tonight will be Junuh. I'm actually going to share my screen to share a presentation. Junuh, you can unmute yourself. I'm going to share my screen.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
hold on 1 second. Okay, go ahead.
It's just gonna get the video up, yep. Okay, go for it.
Shell casings are a critical part to recreating a crime scene. They can show where any semi-automatic gun was fired, as well as the general direction it was fired in. At a crime scene, any casing being recorded out of place would be an issue. 3 casings which were nowhere near their original location would be a disaster.
Jessica, this is David. I'm sorry. I don't see the screen shared. We've got like 4 devices running here. There we go.
There now? Okay.
Can we start at the beginning again?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Go ahead, kiddo. You're good.
Shell casings are a critical part to recreating a crime scene. They can show where any semi-automatic gun was fired, as well as the general direction it was fired in. At a crime scene, any casing being recorded out of place would be an issue. 3 casings, which were nowhere near their original location, would be a disaster. This image is based on the DA's report. According to their story, the shaded red and green areas are where casings should have been found. The red and green dots are where the DA's report says they were found. But what about those 3 that are in no man's land? Those aren't anywhere near where they should be. If the story given by the DA is true, in fact, nothing explains their presence. The bottom line is those casings shouldn't be there, so we went looking for where they really came from. This picture was the first thing that was found. It's not definitive, but it was still a good start to finding the missing casings. Then this picture was extracted from Cuevas camera footage. And finally, bingo. Even though the image is way out of focus, there are clearly 3 casings here. In this image, the shadow of the rim on the right rear of the casing can faintly be seen, confirming it for what it is, a 9mm casing. This is an official crime scene photo from the DA's report. The blue circles are shell casings. The red circle is where the now missing shell casings were located. Now you see them? Now, an hour later, you don't. This picture is of the RV and a red shaded area that shows the likely direction where the 3 bullets were sent downrange. If the casings in the photos were real, then there should have been bullet evidence in this area. So we went looking and found this. And this. The yellow dot shows the approximate location of the bullet hole in the adjacent building. It is clear that Deputy Dominguez fired 3 rounds down the side of the RV, at least one of which impacted a building on the adjacent property. This action left 3 9mm casings by the rear of the RV, which appear to have been illegally tampered with and relocated to a spot that would better support or not contradict the false narrative that Harmon shot first.
That's time.
Okay. Okay, so our next speaker is Deaglan of Lovie. Deaglan, hold on one sec. Let me get the screen share back.
Yeah, so she can hear you.
Hello. Hello,
Okay, go
can you
ahead.
hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
In order to fully understand what happened in this incident, it was necessary to create a detailed timeline. 3 primary sources from the report and video provided by the DA were used. As a result, we now know and can prove that the narrative provided by the sheriff and DA is false. We also know that Deputy Dominguez fired his pistol 3 times at Harmon before he fired at him. Several common events that appeared on at least 2 or more timelines were identified. With those items as a starting point, the events as they actually happened could not be filled in. Here are the first 2 iterations of that table. First is the reference datum, Harmon's second shot. Then the table with the added radio transmissions and their times as found in the logs. Using an audio editor, the gunshots were added, one at a time and to the nearest thousandth of a second. The timeline and evidence shows clearly that it is impossible for Dominguez to have called Code 3 cover and shots fired after Harmon had shot at him and after shooting at Harmon. Between Harmon's shots and the end of the shooting, only 11 rounds were discharged by Dominguez and Baba, and there is no place in that span of time when any more could have been fired. When you add the timeline issues to the fact that the shell casings were nowhere near where the report says they should be, the entire story given by the DA and Sheriff's Office collapses. One possible reason for the illegal activity and the cover-up can be found in the next 5 slides. Deputy Dominguez fired at least 3 shots at Sandra Harmon while her back was turned to him and her arms were being held above her head. At least one of these shots was fatal. Here is the proof. This is Harmon with her back to Deputy Dominguez and her arms raised at the instant bullet number 6 arrived. It appears to have missed and ended up in the fence. Dominguez is shooting from a position at the front of the Ford Explorer seen in the left of the picture.
Go back. One more. There you go. Okay, go.
This is Harmon at the moment of impact from 9mm bullet number 7, as she is fatally shot from behind with her arms above her head and the shotgun tumbling away.
Forward. Yeah. Forward 2, Jessica. There you go. Whoops. Oh boy.
Yeah, they're automatically going, so okay.
Interesting.
Harmon 6/100ths of a second later, with her upper torso absorbing the impact of the bullet in her upper back, her arms thrown backward from the force, and her right leg buckling with her toe dragging on the ground. The shotgun continues to fall. It reaches the shiny spot to her right.
30 seconds.
Harmon is now fatally wounded. She is still facing away from Deputy Dominguez, as can be seen by looking at her feet, and she is unarmed as the shotgun barrel can be seen impacting the ground. Nonetheless, in a third of a second, Dominguez will fire at her once again. An unarmed Harmon, with her hand still raised just a few thousandths of a second later, after Dominguez fires again. The shotgun can be seen clearly on the ground to her right.
3 minutes.
Okay. Next, we have David Ablovi.
Good evening. First, I want to thank my two sons for joining me in this endeavor. I'm immensely proud of them. And I'm sorry, what? What about it? Well, I'm speaking. Sorry about that. And I had written something that I was going to say, but I've decided to cut it short in the interest of brevity. What the DA said in regards to advancing individual cases to the California Attorney General, which was our goal in this entire process. That's why we were doing this essentially. So in respect of our limited time frame and given what the DA said earlier, I'm just going to ask that the district attorney endorse the following request, which I have essentially already made of the city council, which is that the city council forward this investigation, including both the shooting sequence itself and the investigation that followed, which has more than what we just showed tonight in irregularities, to the Attorney General for investigation and possible criminal prosecution if appropriate. My feeling on this is if what you see tonight or what you've just seen doesn't raise that bar to that level, then I'm not sure what would. Lastly, the images of Harmon got jumbled a little bit there at the end. We'll make sure they're available to anybody who wants to see them. They're unfortunate, they're kind of sad, but they're also worth understanding in full. And that's what we've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all that work, time, and investigation. And Steve, we'll open it back up to council for questions because there's obviously no back and forth right now, and we'll continue with public comment. We can all take notes on the side. All right, let's continue with public comment. Thank you, Ablovi family.
Thanks. Next, we have John Ullom. John, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Wagstaff. I do appreciate your coming in tonight. That is a pretty stand-up move. I understand that, well, it looks to me like a lot of the questions are going to be asked that need to be asked. 3 minutes is not enough time. One area I'd like to focus on is that in your report, you mentioned that, and I'm looking at the exact frame that you mentioned it, that though it's blurry, it shows her hands in a manner that's consistent with her holding a shotgun. But that same exact photo shows that her hands are pretty much above her head and that her back is to Deputy Dominguez, who is behind the point of view there. The video shows that that there looks like there are at least 3 shots, if not 5 shots, that were taken while her hands were above her head, the shotgun above her head, and like she was trying to give up. And then to me, that would be a fair description of what you can see in the evidence that we have. Of course, the key evidence is the missing video. We've tried to obtain that several ways, and we've been told it doesn't exist. One of the areas you've glossed over is that Deputy Dominguez, he turns off his video at the end of his interview with people on Main Street, but he's over there at that RV trailer less than 4 minutes later. He went directly there. So I'm not saying that Deputy Dominguez or anybody's lying, but just from the point of view, we can kind of see why there's a reason why that video might be missing, because it would depict whether she really was shot squarely in the back. And that's what the coroner's report says. It doesn't, you don't really explain how she got shot in the back, but the coroner's report shows at least 2, if not 3 fatal shots in the back. And the key video is missing. And frankly, the story is hard to believe because per the sheriff's policy, Deputy Dominguez never should have turned off the video. He was still participating in the event He was heading directly to the trailer to look for somebody who he thought was probably drunk, had a gun, was talking kind of crazy. And probably that was a huge procedural mistake to have just one person knocking on that door when that was sort of the expectation that she might be there. At any rate, the video that's missing is key, in my opinion. And there are log files that exist. Axon camera holds those files in their evidence cloud. They would show exactly when the cameras were turned on, when they were turned off, when they were muted. And I've tried to obtain those logs from your office. I've worked with a man named Joseph Charles, who's been, for the most part, cooperative, but they've never really definitively said they won't give me those logs, but they've clearly made that they don't have to give them to me, and they weren't going to give them to me until after you had finished your investigation. And in my view, it'd be in the public interest to see those log files, because this is a really key component to the investigation video that's missing. And we're kind of being asked to believe that a lot of mistakes were made and just take people's word for it. And when we can see in the other video that her hands were above her head, and the coroner's report shows she was shot in the back, it's vital that we get access to those logs. So I would ask that you would work to help me obtain those. And the last thing, if I have any time left, I'd like to speak to Deputy Baba. There are a lot of victims in this case. Deputy Baba was a hero. The man ran into a situation where he didn't know, all he heard was a gunfight. He didn't take cover. He got put in a position where he had no choice but to shoot Sandra Harmon. There is no doubt in my mind about that. I can't criticize Deputy Harmon or anything about that. What is amazing, and what people would see, is watch how Deputy Baba comports himself after the shooting. The minute that she is secure, he goes into life-saving mode. You can see that he's really visibly upset about what has happened. And this speaks to what the mayor was saying earlier. It's hard to imagine anybody could be okay with shooting somebody. As humans, it's kind of should be hard for people to shoot people. And the way that Deputy Baba handles himself in the 15 minutes of video that I have after the shooting, I think everybody who has a negative opinion of police should watch that and understand that there are a lot of people who pay a price for what gets done every day in keeping us safe, and that the decisions that have to be made happen so fast. And all we as people can really ask for is the whole truth, not the parts that are good, but the whole truth. I know I went longer than 3 minutes. Thank you for your time. Thanks.
That's good. I was wondering where my time check was there, but I appreciate you getting all that out there. All right. Thank you so much, John. Good questions. Go ahead, Jessica. Move us forward.
Next, we have Michael Stogner. Michael, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Steve Wagstaff, thank you so much for attending this meeting, and thank you for putting the information online. It was very beneficial to me to be able to get to the data I was looking for. Excellent presentation by the children, and I'm sorry they have to be involved in an incident like this. I think where we're at, and with Steve not objecting to the city council going to the attorney general for a second review or an independent criminal investigation, which is exactly what I've been calling for, only because of how much the public is at the effect of having to believe or having to trust instead of just videos being made available right from the beginning. We do understand that with whether it's mental health issues or alcohol issues or drug issues, sometimes people are going to get killed by law enforcement. But when we have a law enforcement agency making claims that are just not believable. Now, Sandra Harmon was shot 3 times in the back with hollow point bullets. I don't know that most of the public knows the sheriffs use hollow point bullets. They do, and they've been using them for years, but they're very destructive to a body, and she's a small woman. The question that the sheriff and the DA never told the public is that she was shot at, I believe, 5 times while her hands were above her head with the shotgun on the ground. And that's illegal. So, and I agree with John Ullom that I think Deputy Baba was an innocent victim in this. He was late to the game. He has no idea what was taking place. He thought his fellow partner was under a shotgun assault. I honestly, to this moment, I do not know whether Sandra Harmon fired one single shot. And that's because I've asked the sheriff to tell me how many shotgun pellets were recovered that night, and he refuses to answer that simple question. So maybe if some of you could ask that question, or maybe it's not even necessary if you just decide to go ahead and send this up to the Attorney General, because he or his team will absolutely get to these answers. I think the idea that a deputy, as I've told you before, is my time up?
30 seconds.
Okay, I'll just be quick. So I just want to say that evidence is different than somebody or a caption in a video. It's actually evidence. And just because somebody says something is true, it doesn't mean that it is true. And so, and I know we want to trust law enforcement and we support them, and we do. But there is a time, and this is that time. This doesn't pass. So thank you very much, and thank you for having this meeting.
Thank you, Michael. And last speaker, go ahead, Jessica.
Yeah, last speaker, we have Dan Skegink. Dan, go ahead. Dan?
Thank you, Council. Can you hear me?
We can now. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you to DA Wagstaff and the entire council for meeting with the public regarding this tragedy. And I don't doubt it's a tragedy for everyone involved. There's not a single deputy out there that takes joy in this or looks forward to this as any part of anything other than a horrible part of their job. I didn't see Miss Harmon's hands bagged at the scene. We heard her body was tested for gunshot residue, as we'd expect on a subject that had 11 close-range handgun rounds directed towards her. She had gunshot residue on her body. Were her hands bagged, and did her hands test positive for gunshot residue? My second question is, I didn't see any report of shotgun pellets being recovered from the scene. During this incident, were 0, 1, or 2 shots fired from the shotgun that Ms. Harmon was carrying? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for attending the meeting. We appreciate your comments. Okay, Steve, before I bring it back to council, you don't have to respond again to any of those questions, but is there anything you would like to say based on the discussion that happened? And feel free to absolutely tell me no, and then we can open it up to council. But I just want to give you an opportunity.
Thank you. Adam, I appreciate that. Just a couple of things to mention, because it may be in your mind on that going through. Actually, Dan just asked a couple of questions that I'm going to get the answers for. The hands bagged, I believe they were, but I'm not. I was just immediately trying to find the autopsy report. That's standard operating procedure. And I believe it was done, but I don't want to commit to it if I'm wrong on that, because that is, oh God, forever. That's been standard rule to bag the hands before transportation. That's done by the coroner's office when the coroner arrives. Otherwise, the body is left in that position. The shotgun for the pellets, I don't believe so, but I want to check and verify that. But I do not believe there were any shotgun pellets that were found. A couple of things about shell casings that our first speaker, Junuh, commented on about where shotgun casings were. Two things I'd like to mention to you if that was running through your mind. Number one, I've been out, and this is not to brag, it just shows why I have such white gray hair, being around so long. I've been out to about 250 homicide scenes in San Mateo County over my 43 years. And I bet you in probably 3/4 of them, the casings have been moved. And the reason for that is when you're applying emergency attention, when you're moving very quickly to try and help, particularly if somebody's still alive, if they're, as in here, you've got firefighters, you've got paramedics, you've got other people that are moving quickly. Shell casings get kicked all the time. If they want to check with any, doesn't have to be our county, check with any head of any forensic laboratory in the United States. And they will tell you that there is no predictability with the way guns eject casings. It can really vary from gun to gun. And I know that because I would love to have done some recreation in my various murder jury trials for the jury. And the answer always is, we can't tell you. We can't, there's no pattern we can give you. So as much as I think she would like to do that, the other point to make is we did find 11 casings. They mentioned 3 others. We took their guns right from the beginning, the 2 officers. These were, they were based on what they have, because both these handguns hold 17 rounds and 1 for the chamber. In there was clear there are 11 shots that had been fired. We found 11 casings, and that was exactly what was expended from the handguns. I think that confirms where we were. But again, that's not to discourage them if they want to try and do it. But that is the answer to that area. The shots in the back, that is a very common mantra. I spent a lot of time today going over that again, as I did before we rendered an opinion. I do not believe that to be the case. I do not believe that the shots, one needs to read the coroner's report more than to simply note what the pathologist found, that there were 2 shots, one in the upper left shoulder, one over on the right shoulder. But the key is the path of the bullets as they entered. And I'm sorry to be graphic, but as the path of the bullets as they entered her body in a downward motion, lodging on the one that came into her left shoulder, ending up in her right lung, the one in her right shoulder ending up on the left side. That to me, my conclusion is not a finding, not definite because nothing is, but my belief was that when she bent back over to pick up the shotgun, that those shots entered into her shoulder at that point, and also the 3rd fatal shot, which entered into her torso on the side. Much harder to gauge that, but there, in my belief on what we recreated, and I would spend way too much of your time on it, I do not believe there were any shots in her back while her back was turned while she was trying to surrender. If that were the case, I guarantee you, if that were my belief, I would have had a different conclusion on the 28th as to whether that. The other point, see Mr. Mr. Woolley mentioned endorsing, that I'm endorsing sending it to the Attorney General. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not endorsing anything about what you should do. What I'm telling you is that if that were a decision that you made or anybody else made, anybody can bring something to ask the Attorney General to look at it. What I'm telling you is that doesn't offend me. I'm not going to sit there and say, what in heaven's name is the Half Moon Bay City Council doing, distrusting the district attorney? That's not it at all. There's no false pride here. But I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm merely telling you it is within your right. I take no offense by it in this case or any case of anything we do. Every case when we decline to prosecute any type of violence of any case. And let's see. So that's aiming at what Mr. Ullom raised about the coroner's report, victim shot in the back. That's it. All the coroner's report says is where those bullets entered and where they lodged and where the exit wounds are for those that did not lodge. Regarding Mr. Charles, who's a deputy county counsel, not a member of my office, and the log files, that's between them and what they want to do. If I don't mind if it's, but I don't own that, but I don't mind what is revealed in that. And same thing with Michael Stogner. Michael and I've known each other for decades. The 5 shots in the back, that's not how I conclude it in any fashion. And I think that was sort of where we are. I wanted to throw one more thing out there to make sure it's understood what my job was as the district attorney. My job was to, as I said earlier, to decide, was there a criminal violation of law? And then part 2, and if I felt there was, could it be proven beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury with the evidence? That's 2 different standards of what I might think, what I might feel. I can't tell you the number of cases over the years where I said, I think we have a crime committed here, but we can't prove it to a jury, and we do not file those charges. And that is the singular role as district attorney that I have. It's not to be inspector general to assess good or bad about what occurred. It's was there a crime committed, particularly under our new law. There was a new law went into effect on January 1st of 2020, creating a little tighter standard for what law enforcement must do. and I applied that law in evaluating this case. And Mr. Mayor, other than that, those were the only additional points I would make in response to the points raised by the public members.
I will bring it back now to council for any further questions, and we can go from there. As anybody would like to start? It looks like Harvey, Council Member Rohrabaugh, please feel free to start. Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming, Mr. Wagstaff. Do you think there's an inherent conflict of interest between the DA, who works with the police department all the time, and getting impartial justice? Not criticizing you, I'm asking if you think there's an inherent conflict that we should be aware of.
I'm not offended by that at all. I think it's a very fair question. And my belief is that for the perception, my personal belief, it's not in the actuality. Not in the actuality. I don't think that conflict exists, because we will do our job, and if a case is there, we will prosecute. But I think there might be, particularly today, there might be a perception of that. And that's why with AB 1506, I offered and many other elected DAs, we offered our support to that. If the state wants to change the rules and have the Attorney General do it because of the perception of it, I take no offense of that, because I am a strong believer that the actuality is of importance. The perception of justice is of equal importance. And that's why if that law goes into effect, I have no problem with it.
Thank you.
Harvey, Council Member Rohrabaugh, are you good on your questions?
Yeah, I may have some further questions or comments, but at this point, I'm good. Thanks.
Very good, very good. And I'll move on. I'm just going to go through the process. Councilwoman Penrose?
Nothing right now.
Okay. And then Councilwoman Ruddock, I'm so sorry.
Really appreciate DA Wagstaff coming to our meeting and being forthright. Thank you so much. It's a really big help to our community. Can you confirm the county coroner ruled Sandra Harmon's death a homicide?
Yes, and I can tell you what that means, because I think that it's a question I've been asked multiple times.
Yeah.
Under California law, it's actually the law in all states, any killing of another human being by one person killing another is a homicide, no matter what. It's always a homicide. And that's why the coroner labels every one of these as a homicide. Then one moves into their criminal homicides, where murder, manslaughter, and then there's justifiable homicide, there's accidental homicide, there's a justifiable self-defense, which applies both in law enforcement and out there. Those are also homicides, and that's why that label of homicide can be confusing. I know on Law and Order they define it a whole different way, and that's very confusing. But that's what the reality is in California, that every killing is a homicide.
I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. So, you know, I've heard different people say, well, there were shots fired at Sandra Harmon while her shotgun was on the ground. And I've heard, well, it's illegal to kill an unarmed civilian, police or otherwise. Can you elaborate on that or clarify that?
Yes, you know what, Councilmember Ruddock, that's a good question, because watching the video again, I said it was as she was leaning over, bent over at the waist, as you can see from the video, and just is getting her hands on that firearm. California law does not allow you to kill an unarmed person there. But what the real essence is, unless there is, you have a reasonable fear of imminent, and imminent means not in 20 minutes, but now, harm to yourself. And it can't just be any harm. It has to be great bodily harm or death. You have to fear that under the California's new law. And so under these circumstances, as she was reaching for that weapon, and again, if she just taking a step toward it, no, that wouldn't do it. But by putting her hands on it, and I believe my conclusion is that that was reasonable for both the deputies, both Dominguez, and that was the first time that Deputy Baba, the one who's been called a hero today, that was the first time he fired. He discharged 3 rounds at that point. And it was lawful because she was reaching for a gun that they reasonably, the whole key is, was it reasonable for them to believe that she might discharge that weapon? in light of what they knew. And the key is what they knew. We don't go into things that they didn't know, but what they knew, my conclusion was that that was reasonable.
So just to clarify, so she had a shotgun that would ordinarily have like 2 casings in it, and she would have to reload. Wouldn't it be reasonable to expect in that situation, this, relatively petite woman with a shotgun with only 2 casings, that she's not that big of a threat, or not, that the threat is manageable, that they might rush her? I mean, we don't know if she actually fired the gun. I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. Like, why couldn't they intervene at that point? She was without the gun was on the ground. I saw the video. She kind of, moves over kind of in her heels or whatever she was wearing. Why couldn't they have like rushed her at that point? Why was it considered imminent?
And good question. And there are 2 answers to that, or 2 versions of, not versions, but differences. Number one, this shotgun is exactly what you said. It had 2 rounds. They didn't know that. There are shotguns that can take up to 12 rounds. And they didn't know what type of a weapon that was, because they never got a chance to examine it. They didn't know it. So in terms of how many rounds it had, because I would agree with you, if they knew that there were 2 rounds were, already been expended, they didn't believe they were there. Absolutely. No, you cannot shoot somebody if you believe that the gun isn't loaded or that. Second thing is, Deputy Baba, in his statement to my investigators, made reference to the fact that when she was moving away, she was approximately 7 to 8 feet away from that firearm. He at that point thought in his head, maybe I should rush her. Maybe I should do it. And there's a part of me that says, I wish he had done that, if it could have been, if he would have been able to get there. He was at that point, by our estimation, 15 to 16 feet away. But, perhaps he could have got there in time to, again, do a full linebacker tackle to get her down. He thought about it. By then, she had started back and was what he felt. He made a judgment. He felt she was too close at that point, and that's why he instead went to the firearm. But your point is well taken. If they had known that that weapon was not loaded, it would be a different outcome.
Right. Thank you for that. I want to talk about how we interpret excessive force. So there were a lot of shots fired at her. We have like, potentially like 11 by Deputy Dominguez and a few others. Like, how do you define excessive force? What is the threshold? When is it a problem? Like, where the police might be like overreacting. I mean, when they might, take a shot at a leg and hold off, see what happens. I'm trying, there's been a lot of talk lately on these bigger issues about the use of excessive force. So how is that defined in law? How is that defined by the people who do these investigations? I'm trying to wrap my mind around that.
It's actually a fairly direct and short definition, but not one can easily put their hands on. The definition of excessive force is force that is unreasonable under the circumstances in order to prevent that threat. Unreasonable. It doesn't have to be the only answer. An officer has the right to make subjective judgments, and that's what this new law makes very clear, that they're not taking away from that. They use the word reasonable. And excessive force is when an officer uses more force than is necessary under the circumstances in the view of what would a reasonable officer in the same shoes would use. That would then be excessive. For many, many years, I remember 5 years ago in dealing with the shooting that occurred out in Moonridge, where I talked to a large number of the community there, and they were wondering, why couldn't you just wing a person? The law, not the law, but the practice, I would say, in law enforcement in this entire country, I do not know an exception to it, is that if you take your firearm out, the deadly force, you do not shoot to injure. You do not shoot to simply that. You shoot until the object is incapacitated. in this case, I'll deal with Deputy Baba first. He fired 3 rounds. Very quick. And you know, to fire 3 rounds from these semi-automatic weapons that are used today, it's not the old days of the handgun where the revolver, where it goes in this one here, those 3 rounds can be fired in less than a second. It isn't like, you know, a long interval. You just go boom, 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 boom. The other shots by Deputy Dominguez, as best we can estimate it, were fired in 3 separate occasions where she pointed the firearm at him, or the 2 at him, and then once when she was reaching for it on the ground. We know, based on Deputy Baba's body cam footage, that the middle 5 of those shots were in the second volley after she came back out from behind the RV. We cannot be sure of the number between on his first volley and the last one. Our best estimate is 3 in each one. It could be 2 on that, but we think it's 3 in each one. And again, that takes one, for the 5, it would take 1 to 2 seconds, nothing more than that. So it's very quick action.
So it's like a burst.
Yes. Yeah, it just goes so, I've seen it. I've fired at the range in my cases at times, and it is very, very, very quick when you're in the semi-automatic type of a firearm there. And that's why, I mean, if I would have been very bothered if this had been like 11 shots from Dominguez in one volley, all at one time, I'd say, why did you need that? My question to you, why was that necessary? On the first 2 volleys, it really didn't stop her. And it was only at the 3rd one where we believe that the fatal shots went, at least 2 of the 3 fatal shots went into her back while she was bent over. But that is, I see that constantly in these cases, that it's a lot of shots being fired because the weapons fire so quickly.
Mm-hmm. So is there a reason those semi-automatics are required as opposed to, you know, other weaponry?
You know, where it really changed was a number, I can't speak how long ago. I'm sure the chief would have a better knowledge, but I have this memory of it being going back into the 90s when our gang in California, nationwide, gangs really moved to the forefront. And there was a shooting down in Los Angeles where the officers had, and it's used as a training film all the time now, against some gang members. And they were badly outgunned. They were working on revolvers, and that was honestly led to the deaths of at least 1, if not more, of the officers. And they recognized you need to have, when you're going in today's world, you need to have better firepower. That's about, I bet you could get a better answer, council member, from law enforcement. I'm not a gun person. I'm not a gun aficionado. I don't own any guns. But that is when I saw a change, where I saw the weaponry changing.
So it's like an escalation in response to the threat in the community.
I think so. I think that would be a fair way to phrase it, from a component of the community.
Mm-hmm. Right. So somebody mentioned that that patrol car dash cams automatically have an audio feed that's separate. And so was there an audio feed in this case?
There was not an audio feed on that, and perhaps the chief could explain it better. But what I do know is I was wondering, why wasn't the dash cam, at least the video footage, rolling? And the answer is that only is on when you are have your emergency equipment in the sheriff's office, is what I understand. And in this case, because Deputy Dominguez didn't have it on, he was just going up to the RV because he had heard she might be there, and there might be some guy who would know where she is, Mr. Myers, of course, who knew and spoke to us. It wasn't on, so that's why the dash cam there wasn't activated. Same is true, I believe, of Deputy Baba. He got out of the vehicle, and it was after that that it certainly turned into the emergency situation.
Okay, that's all I have at the moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Debbie, great questions, Councilwoman Ruddick. Thank you. Moving on to Vice Mayor Brownstone.
Thanks, Mayor. And thank you, District Attorney Wagstaff, for coming and speaking with us today. Greatly appreciated. I just had a couple of questions just to clarify what you already said. One was from the autopsy report that said three of the fatal shots entered through the upper back. So if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that the way they entered through the upper back had to have been was when she leaned forward to pick up the rifle like this, and the shots came in through the back. Is that right?
That is the only conclusion that I've been able to come up with, because it can't be while she was standing, because the bullets don't enter and then go on a downward angle. They would go straight. And that's why when she bent at a 45-degree angle, as you can see in the video, at the waist, that is my belief as to what occurred. But again, that's all part of, as I said, I have to prove a case if we charge somebody beyond a reasonable doubt. And that would be, for any jury, they would sit there wondering about that. But for me, the angle of the bullets tells me that the 2 shots in the back of the shoulders, in the back, that would have been the place where it would have occurred.
Well, so in the actual autopsy report, did Dr. Pena have any conclusions as to how they entered?
No. I can assure you, having read hundreds and hundreds of autopsy reports, they never go into that. They simply note, here's the entry, here's the angle, here's where, and here's where, if it's still in the body, here's where the projectile finished. And now in court, a pathologist will, most of them don't want to, but will occasionally testify about, yes, that's consistent with this, or it's inconsistent with that. But they very seldom will give the conclusion, here exactly is what happened. They do more of a physical observation of the body and the projectiles that entered it.
Got it. Okay, I appreciate that. The other question I had was the question regarding the wadding from, the shotgun wadding. And that was found on the roof of Pasta Moon Restaurant. And your report says that indicated that a shot was fired in the direction of Officer Dominguez based on that trajectory. So a couple of questions on that. And you said there were no shotgun pellets, none.
I don't believe so.
All right. So, and you said the wadding was determined to be more than likely from the shotgun rounds that she had, because they were matched with the unspent rounds from her fanny pack, right?
Similar to, yeah, they matched.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a scientific analysis like DNA, but they matched the same style and brand.
So is there like is there any physical forensics to show whether it matched one of the unspent case in the actual shotgun? Or
you know what, not being a shotgun expert, that was one of the questions I asked about, hey, because we can do it very often, we can do it projectiles depending on the case, and I was told no, with a shotgun that's not an available option in the science today.
It's not possible, right?
That's what I was told.
And with the wadding being up on the roof of the building, do you think that that gun was more likely shot in the air? In other words, what was the angle of that shot for the wadding to end up across as high as the building? I was wondering on that.
To get there, it's a great question, because I've dealt with that many trials over the years. When you have a firearm that is at basically straight level, to get it to go up, the angle to go up, you only need to raise it a tiny bit when it's fired. Now, in other words, it wasn't straight up. That's very clear. It wouldn't have been straight up, but it wouldn't have to be at a 45-degree angle. Exactly what angle? I bet that could be determined perhaps by doing a gauge from where she was, but it really would depend on where she's holding it. Does she have it up here? Has she got it at waist? The deputy said he saw it around her waist level, aimed in his direction. But it would only take a slight lifting of it to go in the direction it did.
And is it pretty common to not find any pellets near wadding, where the wadding landed? Is that your experience?
Yeah, good question. In the cases that I've dealt with, sometimes yes, sometimes no. When you're inside, I feel like, shotguns, I feel like we always get it.
Right.
Inside there, because it's an enclosed area. When we're outside, it really varies. Can be, I would have thought we might have found some, but the fact we didn't, experts would tell me, you can't form an ultimate conclusion on that. It's simply another fact that goes on the scale of all the circumstances.
from all, just the last question, from all the sounds that were picked up by whatever body cams were on by all the deputies, and some sounds of shots were picked up by some of
Yes.
those cameras,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And was there any way to determine from, sound forensics, which differentiated the sound of a shotgun versus the sounds from officers' guns?
It's a great question, because sometimes you can do that. There is a different sound that goes with those two. In this case, though, what we found was that when Deputy Baba had his camera on, which gave us the sound, that's what we're relying on for the sound, that he heard on there, you can clearly make out 5 shots as he's sprinting forward to get to that spot. You can hear 5 shots. That's why I state with some feeling of authority that on the second volley that's described to us by the deputy, second volley of shots, that it's 5, because you can make out 5. When you get to the third volley, the shots are sort of muffling each other, and you can't do it because it's coming from 2 guns.
Right.
But what was clear is that we had no sound of a shotgun in that grouping there once Deputy Baba was there and was recording. On the description that we have, if that shotgun was fired, it would have been before Deputy Baba arrived at the scene. So that's why if it was fired once there. Now, Deputy Baba also said he also heard as he arrived, just as he was arriving, he heard a single shot. He couldn't make out what it is. We don't know what that is. That's a mystery to us. We do not know what that is. What I do know is in these cases on both sides, for the person, if they're not dead and they're giving a statement, and if for the officers, and actually in every case there is, trying to gauge the number of shots, particularly when there's multiple guns firing, is pretty impossible because it's hard to distinguish. Even if there were a shotgun fired during the course of that. We have no suggestion that there was during that. But for Deputy Baba, it's the 5 shots on. The second and third volleys are what we hear. The first volley is before he's there.
Okay, that's all I have. Again, greatly appreciate your willingness
Thank you.
to sit here and take all our questions. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Vice Mayor Brownstone. Steve, I really appreciate you coming out and taking all these questions and going back and forth. And we'll go back through the council members in a second. The video from Baba has her shotgun firing its second shot. Cueva's cam caught both of her shots. Why didn't we explore this further? Does that make any sense to you?
It sounds like a fact I'm not familiar with.
Okay.
I verified again today. We don't have, I saw that on one of the videos that the public speakers put up. On the information I've been giving, we don't have proof that she fired a second shot. Our only information there was a second shot is there was a second expended casing in the gun. I want to give the benefit of the doubt to that side. That could have been fired 2 days earlier somewhere. We don't know that. The only sound we heard was what Deputy Dominguez heard as the one firing of the gun.
Okay. All right. And then thank you. And my final question, I asked a bunch of questions earlier about this tragic event. My final question is more of what I would call a high gain question. So let's pretend you are me, or you are this council, and you know what's going on not only in different communities right now, but throughout the United States, the world, all different perspectives. And you are presented with this case and all the different factors. Now, to be honest, you've been doing this, I think, what'd you say, 43 years? And you have people asking you questions that have no professional experience doing this. So, I have to take all that stuff into account. And I've obviously been learning about this myself. If you're in our positions, how do you move forward with the information and the various community inputs that you're seeing out there? How would you move forward if you were in our shoes? And that's my question.
It's a fair question. And well, I'm not, guess what you are? You are far better at your jobs than I could ever be. But what I do suggest to you is that the best way is communication. I'm a big believer in it. If you had a community town hall meeting you wanted me to come speak at, I would do it at any occasion. If I were in your shoes and you felt people wanted a second view of this and wanted to ask the Attorney General to take a look at it within their authority if they choose to. I will tell you quite honestly, having dealt with some cases that are, in my view, are closer calls than this, I would bet the Attorney General will affirm what I did, because what he does is he doesn't try to take it over. The Attorney General's responsibility is to review and see if it is reasonable to have a different outcome. I personally believe the Attorney General reviewing what I viewed will not come up with a different outcome. But I'm not, but again, because I take no pride in this outcome, if people want to do that, I would be comfortable with it. If the 5 of you said, let's do it on that line, if Mr. Nisbet wanted to do it as city manager, he would have that authority to do that too. Every one of those public speakers could call up the AG and say, you know what, we think this one isn't being done, and the AG would have that same authority. AG could do it by reading about it in the newspaper. The AG has that authority if they choose. They don't do it all the time because they're busy people. But if you feel that would help your community, if you feel that would make a difference, I'm suggesting, I don't think it would give a different outcome, but if you, as experts, as the representatives of your community and our democracy, feel this would be a good thing to do to help the community, and that means the community at large, not just a small component, then I feel I might take that step, Adam. That might be something I would do.
Let me ask you one more along those lines. We have a safety committee we've established on council, a separate committee as we're going through addressing all these different topics. Would it be a possibility to have yourself come back to our safety committee, and then we could do a public, again, go through the process again, and go through that, and then maybe the safety committee could make a recommendation as to how they believe we should move forward from there, and then we kind of just go. But because I look at this as the first round of this questioning, possibly, unless people, unless council wants to go another direction, I'm open to it. But I'm just throwing that out as a possibility, and just trying to get a sense of how open you would be to such a thing.
Completely. I'm here to serve you, serve your community completely. Whatever, how often you would, doesn't matter. I'll be there anytime you want.
Thank you for everything. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back to council now and see if there's any further questions or what you'd like to do. Council member Rarbach.
I'm on the public safety subcommittee, and although I appreciate the mayor's suggestion, I think this night is a good. I don't think anything more would be gained by having the district attorney come back and talk to us. I think he's done everything that he can. And I would heartily urge this council to refer this to the Attorney General. I've heard enough questions, uncertainty. The community is not convinced. From my perspective, there are 2 real issues here. One is, did the detectives act lawfully? And the other is, was the investigation done in a honest and fair way? Those are different questions in my mind, and I would love to have the answer to them. Sorry about the phone.
Don't worry.
So I would urge that, in the interest of fairness and to have the community feel better about this, that we have our city attorney refer this case to the Attorney General for his investigation.
Okay. Other council members?
Yes. I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. It was very educational. I am very impressed with the thoroughness of your response to the community's and the council's questions. I think it could have been a difficult thing with another district attorney, but in this case, you have been honest and forthright and answered everything as thoroughly as we would have wanted you to.
Thank you.
I agree with Councilmember Rarbach. The problem is not the information that we've received from you tonight. The problem, as I see it, is the perception that there may be something going on other than what you've said. Not that you're telling a mistruth, but there are other factors. And this perception is very disabling in this community. We've had, as you know, the 2 incidents. The Yanira Serrano incident was the first, and that was extremely upsetting for the community. And to have this one on top of it makes the community much more suspicious than maybe they should be. I don't know. At any rate, that perception is what we're dealing with. And so I would like to see us have the Attorney General review it. I think the other thing that is disturbing, probably the most disturbing thing for all of us, is the fact that Officer Dominguez did not have his body cam on. It's tragic that happened, because had his body cam been on, a lot of these questions would have been answered, and things might have appeared more straightforward. So my recommendation would be to ask the Attorney General to review it, not to disparage any of the work that you've done in your investigation.
I don't take that at all. I absolutely understand completely.
Thank you for that. And good talk. So let me just quickly, Councilwoman Penrose. So I hear what you're saying, and I just want to understand if the district attorney, because I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. If the district attorney does not take on the case, which is a very distinct possibility based on the history of what I've studied, this would, as far as I can tell, end the communications back and forth and all the different pieces. Is it better? Possibly, and that's why I was suggesting before, but I'm totally okay doing whatever you guys want, to have one more back and forth with the community. I agree that there may be nothing for that for us, but if this is the end of that back and forth with Steve, and then we go to the district attorney, and the district attorney won't even accept the case, how, I think it would end-ish at that point. I don't even understand how that process would work. So I'm just trying to understand, is there any reason to, again, do one more meeting, or is everybody, and I'm just throwing that out there for discussion, if that makes any sense.
I don't see any reason to do, to have more involvement that we've already got. We have plenty of community input at this point. I think the community deserves to have their questions answered as well as they can be answered. And I agree with Councilmember Rarbach. We don't need to send it to another committee. We don't need to have District Attorney Wagstaff come and speak again. I don't see what we gain from that.
Very good. Got it. Okay. All right. And then I'll move on to Councilwoman Roddick.
You're on mute, Debbie.
I would like to ask the city attorney, what is involved in asking the AG to review the case? What is the process for doing it? What is the process once it's in the AG's office? What does it all mean?
And I can share a few data points, and I would welcome this attorney to fill in any gaps. I think there are basically 2 options. You could direct the city manager and the city attorney to write a letter to the attorney general to do an independent investigation, make that request. I was actually looking at a couple of recent examples from Bay Area cities. San Leandro and Vallejo recently asked the attorney general to do an independent investigation. I think it took somewhere around 2 months for the attorney general to get back to those cities. In those cities, both cases, I believe they declined to do the independent investigation, though in one city, I believe it was Vallejo, the Attorney General agreed to review some of the policies and practices for that police force. But that's sort of my general understanding of the time frame. Obviously, if you can go ahead and make a motion, if that's what the council desires, to direct staff, and I would work with the city manager and of course the district attorney in terms of the record to make that request. And if you have anything to add, I would welcome any input from you.
What I can tell you is on the Vallejo case, that was the district attorney of Solano County asking the attorney general to take it right from the beginning, and she didn't want anything more to do with it, and so she backed out of it. So that was when the AG wasn't doing a review; he was being asked to do the whole thing, and that's what he declined. Review is something that is basically reviewing the decision that I made and the basis for it, and whether it was erroneous. And that's just done with a direct contact in the San Francisco office of the Attorney General. I'd be, Ms. Ingberg, I'd be happy to get you the name of the person who heads up the office and where you go with it. And what I've learned with the Attorney General's office on time frame, it really varies. It is not something that you would expect an outcome within a few months. It's a long term. If they decide to read, what they do is they would take all the reports that we have, everything that we have, they would sit down, review it. They would take whatever else any citizens wanted to provide up there, like some of the things we saw tonight, and then they would say, yeah, we think we're going to take it, or they're going to say no off the bat. So we've had that request done by families on a couple murder cases where we said the evidence wasn't enough and declined, and they went to the Attorney General, and it took a few months for them to just get back and say they weren't going to proceed any further. They had reviewed what we did and weren't going to change it. But I can get you any of that information easily.
So I have a clarifying question then for DA Wagstaff. So the AG is not going to look at this de novo. He's basically going to review the process that you went through based on the data that you have. And so he's basically evaluating your job as opposed to looking at the individual facts of the case and looking at it like an original action. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, yes, they do a review, but in doing the review and with whatever else is there, because I saw some things tonight I hadn't seen before, if they were to make they could then say, you know what, we're going to open it up. They have that authority clearly. But generally, off the bat, their first thing is to take a review of what the district attorney did and to see if it's there. But as in doing that review, if they said, you know, we don't think that they saw things quite the right way, they could absolutely open it wide within their discretion. They have that authority.
Okay. So now, when they're doing their review, do they have some established standards that they work off of? Like, are there processes where they go through, we look at this, we look at that? Is there a formal process for review? Or is it on the interpretation of the individual AG?
They do, but essentially it's doing the same thing that we do because the law is the same. They will analyze it under the same legal principles on what a criminal. They do not get into, would it have been better if there was a body cam on? That again belongs not to them on that role. So no, they really do follow the same approach that we do as a DA's office. Did this violate Penal Code Section 187 or 192?
Okay. And so when if we go forward with this and the city attorney and city manager prepare a letter, so do you just send sort of a general letter that says, we're concerned about this because of, we want to address the community's needs for proper information, or do you ask for them to look at specific things? Like
you can do either way. You can do it either way. Yep. You can do it either way. I mean, the best way, and I would say this to Ms. Ingberg, which is, the best way to do it is everything. Give a call up there to the head of the the San Francisco office. Let them know here's what we're doing. Let them get a heads up as to here's what's coming and what we'd like you to do. And then they would be able. And then in terms of the old days, I'd bring them a stack of binders. Today we bring them a couple thumb drives, but with all the material on it. But yeah, that's it's fairly that simple. Calling up, they have a recusal unit up there that reviews cases like this and does other matters.
Well, I just want to say that I think I can support this with the goal of clearing the air for the community. I know it's very important to a lot of people here. I think DA Wagstaff, I have no reason to believe that you're doing anything but a top-notch professional job. So I wouldn't be doing it because I worry about the quality of your work. But there are just some things, some facts about the case that I believe require an independent set of eyes. So I think I can go along with this. I'd like to see the letter before it goes out with the city's signature. But I think the public needs to understand that the bar for review, from what I've read, is fairly high, and that we shouldn't be shocked if it's rejected. You have a woman who had a gun, had alcohol, was talking about a race war, who basically came out of the trailer in an aggressive way, against the police officers. It's a little bit of a different situation than an unarmed civilian who may be, wrestled to the ground by police and suffocated with a knee hold or a bag over his head. So I think it's a little bit different. And the facts are, you can kind of see it and how they might have, behaved in a way that's interpreted as reasonable, not just by DA Wagstaff, but by the Attorney General. So I think we need to go in this with open eyes, but I do think that we need to be accountable to the community on this, and I will support it.
Great, thank you, Councilwoman Ruddock. Vice Mayor Brownstone.
Yeah, Catherine, City Attorney. Quick question: can we find out how many requests to review a case like this have been accepted by the Attorney General's office? Let's say in the last, 3 or 4 years, just to get a sense of that, how high that bar is. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say I don't have that data handy, and I don't know if it's publicly available on their website. I recently came across an interview with Javier Becerra regarding sort of the number of cases, and this was in the context of the bill that's sitting on the governor's desk, and basically he's quoted as saying, we only take these cases in exceptional circumstances, typically when there's a conflict of interest with the district attorney, and it's obviously truly exceptional. So I don't have the data, but I would guess it's a fairly low percentage.
Just a couple other quick questions. So, and also just for the public's knowledge, which District Attorney Wagstaff has referred to earlier, it's sort of like we're in an interesting pickle here. Some states actually automatically have these laws in place, right, where the Attorney General reviews, and sometimes it's an external agency, actually, if not, the Attorney General. And of course, the Attorney General's office, in terms of time and expense, are often not prepared to do this unless they get some extra funding. I'm just saying that's the reality. But yeah, I really would be interested if they would tell us how many cases have been accepted, to see just so the public's expectation is set, as Councilmember Ruddock already mentioned. I think that, it doesn't hurt to ask. I would like to know that before we send any letter, that we would definitely include some of the extra information that we've gathered. If they have any other additional information, great. We include that in our request for a review. One question I had again for District Attorney Wagstaff, and I'm sorry I forgot to ask this originally. One of the speakers asked something about asking for some Axon camera logs that might be available. Is that something that you would make available if we put this letter?
I would if I owned them. I don't know. That's not. Axon is the company that all the reports go up into the cloud for law enforcement, every agency in our county. My office, as best I can describe, we reach up and pull it out. We have a portal to that cloud, but we don't own. The law enforcement agencies own everything that's there. So for those logs, it would be a discussion with the sheriff's office and their attorney, who was referenced.
Got it. Okay, great. Appreciate that. Well, we have, I don't know if that's a question to ask right now from our sheriff's representative. Is that something that we could get access to, Sal?
Yeah, again, as Mr. Wagstaff said, that would be a request through county
The
council.
attorney through the council, got it. Okay,
Yep,
got it.
county council would answer that request.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks. That's all I got.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Brownstone. So for myself, first of all, Steve, I appreciate again you coming out, presenting, taking all this feedback. This is a very tragic event, and I think you're doing a very good job explaining it from your standpoint to our community. I am I hear what Deborah Penrose is saying about the perception piece of everything. And for me, it goes even, I guess, a step further. I have my own questions. It's not, I don't just want it for perception purposes. I'm actually trying to understand this process more, learn from it myself, and all the different aspects. That being said, I do want you to know I reached directly out to the family and asked a bunch of questions. I did not hear back, and I was trying to gauge to prepare for this meeting to understand all the different aspects because I am trying to do my best to be as supportive as I possibly can to the community, to the family, all members involved. One of my questions is the AG. So what we're talking about here is kind of like, is this a review of your findings or is it their own personal investigation?
Initially, it's a review
okay.
of what we decided and whether it had a basis. However, in reviewing, if they felt that it warranted a further investigation, they could take two paths. They could suggest we do it, or they can do it themselves. And they have all that authority to do so.
Okay. And then my last question, which again, I was slightly concerned about, you've heard me address this a few times now, is if we go this route and the AG does not take the case, what happens from there? Is your report final and then done type of thing? Or is there, if for people that don't feel they've gotten the answers that they need, what is the process at that point, if that were to happen?
It ends. If the attorney, there is no other spot to appeal to, it's to me. And of course, I'm not bullheaded about this. If somebody brought us information that caused me to have a different view, I would always keep an open mind to it. But however, you're right, absent something that would change, if the Attorney General were to decline or to look at it and say, no, I affirm the decision, the case is over. On the criminal side of it.
Okay. And then just last question, was there anything presented tonight that made you think any way that maybe you would, to give you different thought, or do you just personally, as just between all of us here, when you heard everything that was brought up, you're still like, I stand by my recommendation 100%?
What I heard tonight was some of which I think was just wrong, a misinterpretation. That's okay. There were a couple things that I thought, oh, that's interesting, that were either Mr. Ullom or Mr. Stogner brought up. And I wouldn't say gave me pause, which said, that would be interesting to turn over to my investigators and have them take a look at it if they ever wanted to present it to us. But overall, on what I heard tonight, no, there was nothing that caused me to form a different view than that the two deputies acted in accord with the rules set forth in the California Penal Code.
Okay. Oh, very good. Again, I'm extremely appreciative for you showing up to this meeting, for you answering all the questions, for your professional demeanor the entire time. Thank you so much.
You know what, may I say thank you to all of you, everybody here. This was not arduous. This was something I appreciate the open mind that you have. I hope you appreciate the open mind I try to have. And I'm pleased to be able to speak with you instead of just watching you on a screen while Mike Callaghy is talking. I'm glad to have met you tonight, at least maybe not 3-dimension, but in person. So beyond that, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I hope your meeting doesn't run you too late tonight. And I wish you the best. And if there's any follow-up questions, or Ms. Ingberg, if you need, if anything I can provide to you on that, depending on where the council goes, obviously we're here to serve. Be glad to help out.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind staying on, I'm gonna go back through and we'll see if we have a motion, a second, and then we can go from there.
Very
So,
well.
and
Very well.
I think we kind of started that process, but I think we should do it formally again, if that's okay. And do we have a motion?
I move that we ask the Attorney General to review the District Attorney's report on the killing of Sandra Harmon.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, may we do a roll call vote? And Jessica, will you do the honors, please?
I just also one clarifying question
Please,
on
please.
the motion. Would you like that request to come back to council at your next meeting for review? We could put it on the agenda, or would you like me to work with the city manager to get that out?
Do you have a recommendation that you think is best, just out of curiosity, or?
I think you could go either way.
Okay.
I don't think we need to have it come back to council. I think council's pretty clear on what they want. Could you send a copy of the letter to council members before it goes out so that we have a day to look at it?
Actually, I'd like to see a draft.
In that case, I guess I would recommend that it come back to the full council just to avoid any Brown Act issues with edits.
Okay, so you suggesting that we do it as a open session next, or is this a closed session, or how would you go about doing it?
This would be an open session item on your next regular agenda. We would attach a draft the letter for council to approve before it gets sent out.
Excellent.
Actually, that's like 3 weeks away, though. Why don't we just authorize staff to produce a letter and get that out? But I would like to see it.
Is that doable, Catherine?
You know, we could share a copy FYI. It's just the editing part was the concern about the Brown Act issue. Obviously, once you send the letter out, it would be public and everyone would have an opportunity.
So we'll just trust you to write it correctly then.
Yeah, I think the direction is clear, and we have several models actually from other cities that have requested similar review.
Yeah, I would write it in a way that does not foreclose options, to express our concerns about certain aspects of this, and rather than just say specifically reviewing, that we actually have them review, and based on their review, to feel free to open the investigation. I don't want us to be too restrictive on it, but to have it be
understood. Yeah.
I'm good with that. I support that. Are we back to, I believe, a roll call, Jessica?
Yeah, wait. So hang on one second.
Please.
No, sorry, I just wasn't 100% clear here. So we are going to get a draft first. Is that right?
No.
Yeah, I don't see what the rush is for us to be able to have a look at it if we want edits, frankly.
I think we need to strike while the iron's hot.
I think the iron's going to stay. Okay, I'm disagreeing. Yeah, I got it. But I think the iron's hot. It's going to stay hot. So what's the rush if we wait 3 weeks and have a chance to look it through and make sure everything's, added to it that we talked about tonight?
I have a suggestion. We have a subcommittee of council members Ruddock and Rarbach. If we asked you to present them with a draft of the letter, they could review it and make any changes, and it wouldn't be violating the Brown Act.
That would also work. Yeah, we could work with a subcommittee and have them review it.
That way we can get it out quickly and it can be reviewed.
Well done, Deborah. I support that.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks for that suggestion.
Very well. Very well done. Okay. I'm going to try to go back to the roll call vote. Can we take a roll call vote?
Yes, Councilmember Penrose?
Yes.
Councilmember Rarbach?
Yes.
Councilmember Reddick?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brownstone?
Yes.
Mayor Eisen?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
And again, I just want to appreciate, there's nothing like coming to a meeting and then having people elevate an investigation above. So I appreciate the fact that Steve, you've commented many times, you're not taking it personally, and I don't want it to be a personal attack in any way, shape, or form. We just are trying to do what's best for our community here in Half Moon Bay. So thank you so much for everything you do and your understanding.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. You all have a good evening. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on from this item, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just share something based on a conversation I had on this item with a council member before the meeting.
Please.
Just some takeaways and what we do with this. I think there's a couple things that based on this conversation and what we've heard tonight, that this information helps with. I think one, you've already taken an action as a council based on what you've heard tonight and from the community over the last several months. You're directing staff to forward a letter and make a request to the Attorney General to review the case and review the investigation. And so that's the first, I think, takeaway from this. The second one is you have a legislative subcommittee and you develop an annual legislative platform. And I think based on what we've heard tonight, there's an opportunity in your next discussions around that legislative platform to elevate this issue, any sort of legislation around law enforcement, police reform, investigations like this, to really elevate that on our platform going forward so that the city can be much more actively engaged in statewide legislation around this issue. And then I think the third piece is, as many of you know, staff and the subcommittee, as well as staff working with Councilmember Penrose, is in the middle of quite a bit of work around law enforcement and relations with the community and potential reforms. And I think this, and that includes a white paper study that's being researched on a variety of topics around our contract with the sheriff and law enforcement practices in general. We're doing, right now, we're in the middle of focus groups that on various topics to learn more about the relationship between law enforcement and our community. Those will expand into larger citywide discussions. This, I think, is another piece of that. I think for myself, I've learned a ton about the relationship between the district attorney and the sheriff's office, how these are investigated. I think we're learning quite a bit just about this case even. I know for myself, I have learned quite a bit more about this case just tonight. And I think that all plays into as another piece of all this discussion, which will allow us, I think, as a community and as an organization to really understand and think long-term about our relationship with the sheriff's office, what law enforcement looks like here in our community going forward. And so I think, again, just we're so grateful for the district attorney for coming tonight. And I think this is another really important piece of all the work the council and staff are doing around this in informing you and the community. And so expect as we come back for further discussions on law enforcement in general, that there are things we've learned from this that will play into that in future discussions with the sheriff.
I appreciate that. I love the moving forward thought process that we're going in with at this point. So thank you so much, Matthew, for that. All right. Do we need to take some sort of break to transition from this meeting into our city council meeting? I believe we need at least 5 minutes to change. We're going to stay on this link. Is that correct, Jessica?
Yeah, we just need to stop the recordings of this meeting and then let those complete and then start new recordings for the 7 o'clock meeting.
And so that should be at least 7 minutes or 10 minutes. What should we do?
I think 10 would be fair.
10. So I would suggest that everybody put themselves on mute, turn your cameras off, and come back at 8:10. And at that point, I will take roll call and we will start the regular city council meeting.